So we're very excited at Cambridge Partners to be able to host this first client briefing for the year. And we've got two, I think, absolutely outstanding speakers. And you will hear from them later and I'll introduce them to you. But we're very privileged to have people of the calibre of Barry and Mary with us. 2022, as you all know, has been a year of two halves for markets. And Scott Rainey, who most of you, I'm sure, will have heard from previously, will address this shortly. And nevertheless, volatility over the last 12 months or so has been at the fore. And as advisors, we're acutely aware of how that is very unsettling for clients and for what the future may look like. So therefore, we've actively tried to make sure that we've increased our communications with clients, we've provided more information and have attempted to put the cycle we're currently in into context. One of the key values we have at Cambridge Partners is people first. And so as clients, we hold you at the forefront of all of our decisions and the way we want to deal with you as a client. Now we do have, interestingly enough, some technology, and I'll just move giving you the safety briefing. So Slido. Now, many of you won't know much about Slido, but normally you would find in a presentation like this that someone would go around with a roving microphone and you could ask questions. So in this one, this Slido, you are able to ask questions. So all you need is your cell phone and to follow scan the QR code, which is on the back of your program, and you'll see there the Slido code, #3431539. So if you have a question for any of our speakers, then you simply type that into your phone and that will be sent to Slido, through Slido, and we will have a session nearer the end of this presentation to answer those questions. The easiest way to deal with this is to open the camera on your phone and hover it over the QR code, which is, as I said, on the back of your program. Then when you see a yellow box on the camera, you simply press the link and it will take you to an area where you can submit your questions for the panel for later on. We are having what we call a fireside chat near the end of this afternoon, and so your questions will be answered during that time. If we don't have enough time, I'm sure that our guest speakers would be happy to meet with you after and answer anything that's pertinent for yourself. So this afternoon is going to run for roughly 3.5 hours. So that does sound quite a while, but I'm sure the time is going to go very, very quickly. So firstly, we're going to have a market update from Scott Rainey, who, as I said before, is well known to many of you. He'll be followed by our guest speaker, Barry LaValley. And Barry is the author of our retirement book called So You Think You're Ready to Retire. Then we'll have a 15-minute break, which you can stretch your legs, have a quick drink. But what we would do is encourage you to remain here. We've got some gelato being delivered for you all, and we've got some entertainment for you during that break. Following the break, we've got Mary Holm, who again is going to be very well known to you all, and her presentation is 7 ways to improve your wealth. We'll then have the fireside chats and then finish up and stay for a drink out in the foyer where we all met previously. We do have a disclaimer for all of our speakers, and that is that the opinions of our speakers are their own. So Cambridge Partners isn't giving investment information, it's general information, and it doesn't consider your own personal situation or financial goals. So please don't consider this personalised financial advice. If you do, we'll probably have the FMA giving us a call tomorrow morning about that. But any discussion on past performance has no guarantee of future returns. And as I said earlier, you're very welcome to stay and have a chat to any advisor from Cambridge Partners if you are wanting to have a personal discussion. So it's my pleasure now to introduce you to our first speaker, which, as you'll see from the agenda, is Scott Rainey. So Scott's worked in financial markets for over 18 years as an advisor, an asset consultant, and as a fund manager. Scott's a principal and financial advisor with Cambridge Partners, and he has a passion for analysis and as well holds the prestigious qualification of being a chartered financial analyst. He's generally happiest when he's delving into complex sets of reports or talking to you about why you shouldn't be doing that. So please join me in welcoming Scott Rainey.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you all. That's much more generous than I thought you would be, so that's a great start. Okay, so welcome everyone, there we go, backwards. Welcome everyone to our market update. I am very excited to be here with you, my first time presenting here at Te Pai, so with my excitement disclosed, we can get into it. I'm going to talk to you about investment market returns. I'm then going to talk to you about recent bank failures in the US, and then I'm going to talk to you about the R word, that's recession, and what that might mean for investors. This is the performance of various asset classes or investments over the last 12 months ended 28 February 2023. This is the growth of $1 if you'd invested 12 months ago. Leader of the pack in yellow is Australian shares, where $1 invested 12 months ago would be $1.08. In second place, in orange, is global infrastructure, where $1 invested 12 months ago would be $1.06. In third place, in green, is cash. That $1 would have turned to $1.03. After the metals, it starts to look a bit grim. Other than international shares unhedged in Navy, which just at the end of February peaked its way back above $1, everything else is negative. That's a tough year. A 50-50 mix of shares and property and cash and fixed interest would have declined in value to 96 cents. As I said, not a particularly good year. However, I always say that 1 year is never long enough. You need at least 3 years' data. This is the same slide now over 3 years rather than 1. The leader this time is unhedged international shares in Navy, where $1 invested 3 years ago would have grown to $1.32. Pipped into second place this time is Australian shares, where $1 invested 3 years ago would be $1.31. In third place, in orange, is global infrastructure, where that $1 would have turned into $1.14. In fourth place is a 50-50 mix of shares and property and cash and fixed interest, which would have grown to $1.08. Now that's about double what would have happened to cash in green, which would have turned to about $1.04. Now, those of you that like a bit of math, and I disclose that's me, would actually be able to figure out that that $1.08 amounts to about 2.6% per annum. That's even though that's double the return of cash over that time period, that's not a great reward for that amount of volatility. But that's 3 years. What about over 5 years? Same slide, this time the growth of that $1 invested 5 years ago, not 3. Now, this looks like a slightly better story. Every asset class on this slide is positive, albeit some of them only just. At the very bottom there, it's international fixed interest hedged to the New Zealand dollar. It's only just above $1 at about $1.02. But at the very top, in Navy, is unhedged international shares, where $1 invested 5 years ago would be $1.62. That 50-50 mix of shares and property and cash and fixed interest, now that would be worth over $1.20. Now that's a annualised return of a little over 4% per annum. That $1 invested in cash, that would be worth $1.07. Now that about 2% extra per annum return, that's reward for patience and discipline, at least over this time period. Now, very recently, last week in fact, 2 banks in the US failed. Silicon Valley Bank, so named for its preponderance of tech companies in Silicon Valley, failed. Not good news. Signature Bank, a regional bank in New York, same thing happened. Now, the reason for these failures is really interesting. It's actually a really old-fashioned reason. It's a run on the bank. This is the sort of thing that caused lots of collapses in the Great Depression, when people were concerned about the bank's ability to give them their money back, so in they walked and took it. This time, of course, it was all electronic. Now, the reason that this got quite a lot of news in New Zealand, apart from being a reasonably slow news week, is that 4 New Zealand companies had money in Silicon Valley Bank. Comvita, Xero, Ike GPS and Rocket Lab all had various sums invested in Silicon Valley Bank, from as little as 2.5 million to as much as 62 million. Now, at the beginning of last week, that was a big problem. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation guarantees all investments in US banks up to $250,000 US dollars. That's about 407,000 New Zealand dollars. Now, that's not great if you've got 62 million invested. However, a few days later, it wasn't such a big problem, at least not for depositors, because the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the Federal Reserve, and the Treasury, that is the US government, stepped in to ensure that all deposit makers get all of their money back. So those four New Zealand companies and everyone else who had money in Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank all got all their money back. In fact, Treasury, the Federal and the FDIC and the Federal Reserve all then undertook programs to refloat or sell those banks. The interest in Silicon Valley Bank was so large that the FDIC had to build a book. That is, they had to go out to market and say, give us your expressions of interest in refloating this bank, because the nature of the relationships there was so valuable. Signature Bank actually had almost all of its assets bought by a rival last week. Now, banks are scary, or at least bank failures are scary. So if we think about what that means, actually, it's not that unusual. The US bank market is very different from the New Zealand bank market. The US bank market is fragmented and very regional. It has a long history of bank failures. Going all the way back to the Great Depression, there were 9,000 bank failures in the Great Depression. That actually led to the emergence of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, which was developed by Franklin Delano Roosevelt as part of his New Deal. But that wasn't the last time they had massive failures. In the 1980s and 1990s, over 1,000 banks failed in what was called the savings and loan crisis. The FDIC stepped in a lot there. In the GFC, the largest bank failure of all time, Washington Mutual at 17 billion failed. 500 other banks did as well. In the period running up to the GFC, that is 2001 to 2007, which was a golden time for banking. That was when Alan Greenspan was governor of the Federal Reserve, and his motto was go for growth. That meant easy monetary policy conditions and low capital requirements for banks. Really good time to be a banker, 25 banks still failed. In 2020, when the federal fiscal monetary policy conditions were the most generous they have ever been, there was more money and it was cheaper than it's ever been in the history of time, there were still 4 bank failures. The fact that there were no bank failures in 2021 and 2022, that was unusual. That's the first time there have been 2 years of consecutive no failures in the US banking system in decades. So not pleasant, but actually not that unusual. What about the size of the two banks because they were big failures. Silicon Valley Bank was $6 billion. Signature Bank was $4 billion. Those are big numbers. And in a nominal sense, those are the second biggest and third largest failure of a bank in the United States in history. However, since 1929, the size of the US economy in terms of gross domestic product, or GDP, that's the sum of everything that that country makes, has grown from $0.11 trillion in 1929 to $23 trillion as at the end of 2021. New Zealand's GDP in US dollar terms last year, $250 billion. That's a bit humbling, isn't it? So while $6 billion is a really big number, it's 0.003% of the total size of the US economy. Now that doesn't mean, and I don't wish to be flippant, that it doesn't matter. It does. And if you were a shareholder in Silicon Valley Bank, at least a large shareholder, that'd be pretty upsetting. Maybe less so for diversified investors, but I'll come to that. So Silicon Valley Bank was in fact the 18th largest bank in the United States. So what does that mean if you have a portfolio that holds lots of individual securities? Well, you probably had it. And in fact, if you're a client of Cambridge Partners, yes, you did. You had it in your portfolio. It represented 0.03% to 0.04% of around about 20% of your portfolio. I apologise for all the percentages. What that actually means is that in your portfolio, you've had 0.006% to 0.008% exposure to Silicon Valley Bank. Now, the reason that I put this as being not such a big deal, and I don't mean to minimise again, is that there's one fund manager out there that had a very large exposure to Signature Bank. To our knowledge, we had none. They had 80 million invested across their client portfolios. In one of their funds, it was 4.81%. That's 4.81% that has disappeared, relative to 0.03 or 0.04% in the funds that our clients have got invested. That's diversification. That's why in our underlying portfolios, we have between 6,000 and 9,000 underlying exposures, because we don't know where the next Silicon Valley is going to be. We do know, by the way, that if you have the other, 99.97% of your portfolio invested in a diversified mix of other assets, that you would have done well. The S&P 500, which is the main index in the United States, the one that Silicon Valley Bank is in, that's actually up 1.5% in value since Silicon Valley Bank failed. So, if you held a diversified portfolio and Silicon Valley Bank was in it, you're actually up. That's most of our clients, by around about 0.07%. Interesting. I'm going to change tack now and talk about recessions. So to begin with, what is a recession? There's been a lot of talk about it lately, and I thought it would be useful for us to A, define it, and then talk about what it might mean for you as investors. A recession is a significant, widespread, and prolonged downturn in economic activity. Now, experts usually define a recession as 2 consecutive quarters of negative economic growth. And those are the words, by the way, isn't that terribly academic? 2 consecutive quarters of negative economic growth. That's a decline, isn't it? That's a contraction. So we'll use that. So 2 consecutive contractions in GDP. Now the problem with defining a recession is that it takes a long time to happen. 6 months of actual negative data, another month and a bit, or if you're in New Zealand, 2 months and a bit, before you actually get any information that tells you that you are in a recession. But what might that mean? Well, that means we should look at other indicators that will give us some indication that we're in a recession. One indication that people talk about is bear markets. Now, a bear market is a fall of 20% from peak to trough of investment markets. Most investment markets around the world, that includes New Zealand, entered bear market territory in June last year. One postulated idea is that bear markets predict recessions. Since 1945, since 1929, there have been 15 recessions in the United States. Bear markets have predicted 26 of them. So no, bear markets do not predict recessions. What about economists? That's their job, isn't it? Last week, New Zealand economists from the Big Five, ANZ, ASB, BNZ, Westpac and Kiwibank all predicted that the New Zealand economy might have one foot in recession with negative growth in the December 2022 quarter. They were correct. Stats NZ released their numbers on Thursday of last week, and New Zealand economy shrunk by 0.6% in the December 2022 quarter. None of the economists got the number right, but they were all directionally accurate, so that's something. However, last year, I tested John Kenneth Galbraith, who's an infamous economist, whose main proposition was that the only function to economic forecasting is to make astrology look respectable. Now, I tested that premise last year by testing the economist's predictions for the official cash rate at the end of the year against an astrologer's prediction for me. The astrologist did a better job. So maybe the economists can signal a recession, but based on the evidence, probably not. So we don't know if we're in recession. But if we were, what might that mean for investment markets? It's more interesting. So, what I've done here is I've analysed the returns from the S&P 500, that is the largest stock market index in the US, since 1945, during periods of recession and the year after. It's been a really interesting exercise. 13 recessions over that time period. Actually, during the time period of a recession, stock markets went up. Not a lot, by on average 1%, but they went up. Now, the year's slightly different because recessions typically don't last a year. Here's the data. And what it shows is that about half the time, stock markets go up, and half the time, stock markets go down. Actually, that's about right. It's probably 57%, 43%, but in recessions, that's what happened. The average return from the S&P 500 over the 12 months that included a recession was negative 1.1%. Now, that data is skewed by a couple of events. In 2008, the global financial crisis, if we exclude that number, or the 1974 oil shocks, either number gets excluded, the average becomes positive. They both get excluded, the average becomes about 6%. The average over the total investment period from 1945 to 2020 was 10.9% per annum. What's interesting is that the returns in the year after a recession were almost universally positive and outsized. The average return from the year after a recession was 16.9%. That's more than 6% higher than the long run average. Now, what's interesting is when those returns come, because that's much more difficult to show, but typically they come just after an economy has exited recession. What that shows is that trying to pick when to be out of markets and trying to pick when to be in is really difficult. The average return over all those 26 years was about 8%. That's pretty close to the long run average. If you take out the GFC in 2008, it's 10%. That is the long run average. So, what can we conclude from that? Good question. Discipline, patience, and not reacting emotionally to what the news media suggests to us are rewarded over time. Banks, all companies, in fact, sometimes fail. The key is to taking a diversified approach to your investment strategy. So you've got exposure to thousands of them rather than tens. If one company fails and it represents 0.006% of your portfolio and the remainder goes up, that's okay. If one company fails and it represents 4.81% of your portfolio, that's pretty distressing. Over the long run, investments will perform. You will be rewarded for your discipline. Thank you for listening. I'm going to be sticking around at the end of the session, so you feel free to use Slido and ask me any questions you like. And now I'll hand back to Richard.
Thanks very much, Scott. And as per usual, you've been able to shed for all of us some clarity around some pretty complex issues that are going on at the moment. It's now my pleasure to introduce Barry LaValley to you. Now, Barry lives in Canada, Vancouver, Canada, and we're delighted that he's been able to join us here in Christchurch. Many of you may well remember Barry from previous visits he's made to Christchurch. So Barry has worked in financial services for over 40 years, and he's coached and educated financial advisors with a focus on the psychology of communication. Barry's published 3 books, including So You Think You're Ready to Retire, which is a book that we at Cambridge Partners use. And that's the basis of his presentation today. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Barry LaValley.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to everybody. I looked at the weather and I thought, well, you know, I might cut into the attendance, but I take my hat off to all of you who are getting ready for winter. I want to talk to you about retirement, and the challenge that I have is that we have a pretty diverse group. We have some people who are clearly not even close to retirement, and we have others who clearly are already in retirement, but I don't want either one of those two groups to worry. I got stuff for you, things to think about. For the vast majority, though, I'm going to get you to think about your own retirement. And I want to ask you a question. When you think of your retirement, what vision comes to mind? Now, I'm going to focus on you right here, the lady in the front with the stripes, okay? Everybody looks down to see what they were wearing in the morning. Welcome to getting older. Okay, all right, so when you think of your retirement, what vision comes to mind? What's that? Okay. All right, what else? Okay. And have you thought a lot about retirement? Have you planned for it at all? Okay, good, good. So you're comfortable with where you are? All right, all right. Is this, forgive me, is this your partner? And are you comfortable? What? Are you comfortable with where you are? Okay. All right. It's quite often I get one person is really got it all together, have a plan. The other person says, look, I've worked 40 years, I'm done now. And then you're trying to put those two plans together. What we want to talk about today is retirement in the reality of 2023. Because for many of you who are a lot younger, by the time you get to retirement age, it won't exist anymore. The concept is a degraded concept. Retirement, as my parents taught me, was you get to be age 65. That's the demarcation point that says you're old. And now all of a sudden you get to plan for this 30-year-long weekend, right? Now think about that for a minute. 30 years of being able to do what you want. 30 years of not having to go to work. 30 years sounds pretty special. But have you ever noticed in life that the more that we do something, even if it's enjoyable, the more boring it gets after a while? Let me illustrate. It's called the paradox of leisure. And the paradox of leisure is we like our weekends, right? Who here works Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4:30, 9 to 5, gets weekends off? All right? You do, you do. You like your weekends? What do you like about them? You don't, you're not at work, all right? And you get holidays, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, union, 12 weeks, you get holidays? And you can do what you want? don't have to work? All right, let me ask you this question. If you had leisure 7 days a week, 365 days a year for 30 years, where's your break? We like things that are a break because they are different than what we normally do. We love our weekends. And obviously, if you love your weekend, you're going to love a whole bunch of them all together, over and over, until you become brain dead. Do you know what successful retirees use as a break from leisure? Work. Now, it may not be for pay, volunteering, for example, getting out into the community. But this idea that this is a 30-year-long vacay, I'd like you to get rid of that. I'd like you to get rid of the concept that we are retiring because it means we don't have to work anymore. Well, it may mean we don't have to work, but so many New Zealanders, Australians, Americans, Canadians, etc., actually want to work when they get past age 65. I mean, at 65, you're still young and vital, and you still got things to do. And there's something that gets me about that concept of not working. And it flies in the face of science. Science tells us that the longer that we work at something that we love, the longer we live. Now think about that for a minute. Longer you work, longer you live. Those numbers are unassailable. And yet we get so many people that are thinking that work is bad, leisure is good, and prolonged leisure is great. Well, I'd like to change the thinking. It doesn't mean that you can't have prolonged leisure. But you start to do things that really are workplace replacements. So you love to sail. Are you going to sail every day? Some of you might think, yeah, every day I'll be out there. Better example is the golfers in the room. You now get to, in retirement, golf every day. Day in, day out. Now, I'm a golfer. I don't know about you, but by about the fourth or fifth day, I am golfed out. But we have people at my golf course in Nanaimo, British Columbia, Canada. The average age is about 70, and they have simply replaced work with golf. They're out there every day. Day in, day out. They're like the U.S. Postal Service. Rain, sleet, snow, they're on the golf course. Much of the time they're married. You say to them, why are you golfing so much? Why are you here every day? The answer is simple, because it kills 5 hours. And I said, well, what does your spouse think about that? Well, she's trying to get him to play 36 holes in a day. It kills 5 hours. Here's the reality of retirement. Reality is, some of you really get it, and you recognize that the things that made you successful in your work career or in building a home and a family, it's the same things that will help you in this latter period of your life. Retirement's not a destination. It's not a new life. I often ask this question, true or false? Will you be a new person when you retire? And people say, oh yeah, I'll be a new person when I retire. Oh, I can't wait. When we retire, we're going to be new people. We're going to go here, do that, be these people. We're miserable now, but we're going to be new people. We're going to be so happy. Folks, if you're sitting in this room right now and you're miserable, that's your life, right? Something else isn't going to come along and deliver it for you. I want you to think of retirement in terms of it is the last third of your life. Now, when you think about it in that way, something said about life, the one thing we all know about life is none of us gets out alive. So now we're planning for the finish. Finish could last 30 years, right? Okay, let me ask you a true or false question. True or false, retirement, as we call it, could be the longest phases of our life. What do you think? Well, yeah, could be 30 years, 35 years. Except, from the time that I am 65 through to the time that I'm in my late 80s, if I make it that far, I'm going to go through anywhere from 6 to 8 very distinct transitions driven by my health or the health of my spouse. It is not one long life phase. And I often get people who come to my sessions and they clearly have got it all together. They have all the money in the world that they need, and they have their health, and they have their spouse. Their kids are gone and not moving back, and they're living the perfect life. And they think that's going to be it forever. Well, is it? We hope it is. But the reality of life is things change. Things break. For the average Australian, New Zealander who is over 70 years old, you have, on average, 2 or more chronic conditions that limit your ability to do the things in life that you want to do. You didn't buy the fact that you have that contraption in front of you. You didn't anticipate that when you were younger? No. I'll bet it's a pain in the ass. Right? Yeah. But such is life. As we plan for the last phase of our life, last phases, we have to think in terms that life is very precious. And that in retirement, if we can just stick with that word, we have to do as much as we can, as quickly as we can, and hope we can do it for 30 years. You never put anything off in the last 30 of your life because it changes so quickly. Now, I talk about the changing face of retirement. We have the boomer generation who are now putting our sights on retirement. Most of us, many of us, consider that work will have to be part of our life. And it doesn't have to be work for pay, but it means still getting involved in the community. It means not sitting around all of the time and not doing anything. Because here's another scientific fact. If you don't continue to use this, you will lose it. If you don't continue to use your mind, to keep the neurons firing, to have some pizzazz in your life, you will die. All other things being equal. And so as you look at your life and what you want to accomplish in this last third of life, I think you're going to have to say, I need to do something. I need to be active. And that will be the focus of the balance of my presentation. Talking about why the changing face of retirement means that this concept of the modern elder is probably more appropriate than us thinking that we are old, that we are decrepit, and that we're going to die. We're going to live. And because we're going to live, we're going to live to the fullest. Now, not all of you may want to do that or are prepared to do that. I'll talk about marriages in a minute, but one of the issues that married couples face is one of you in the marriage wants to continue to live and do everything that he or she can do. And the other one said, bugger that, I don't want that. I just want to sit and rest. And the longer I go sitting and resting, the more comfortable I am. And that's human nature, isn't it? Sitting around doing nothing. It's called continuity theory. Psychologists even have a name for it. And it says the older you are, the less likely you are to do something, the less likely you are to want change, and the more you have the tendency to fall back and to nest. I look around this room, you come on a rainy afternoon to listen to speakers. You're obviously not in the position of nesting. But I'll bet you know people who are just filling in the time. They're not active in their lives. In fact, they hide in their life. They may be awake and may be standing upright, but that's about it. People on the golf course. People who travel all the time and don't get anything out of it and don't even know why they're doing it. You say to them, how much travel are you really going to do when you retire? Oh, a lot. I'm going to travel a lot. I'm going to take 2 trips a year, 6 months each. We're just going to travel our minds out. Are you really going to travel that much? The older that we get, the less likely we are to travel. It doesn't mean that we don't, but our travel is more associated with family than anything else. And we are less likely to go out and do all of those things that we said we would do when we are on the verge of a 30-year-long weekend. I think instead of just playing out the string, we have the opportunity of really living that last third of life. And the best example of what this life might look like is if you consider yourself, at any age here, consider yourself the modern elder. Now, the modern elder came from the head of Airbnb, who was trying to decide what to call himself. And he said, well, I'm not elderly. I hate that. I hate being a senior. I don't feel like a senior. I don't know if you do. I don't feel like a senior. So he came across the concept of the modern elder. And the modern elder isn't elderly, because elderly is how other people perceive you, but it shouldn't really be how you perceive yourself, should it? You live a life of happiness. We all want to live to be happy. Therefore, we have to decide what happiness is, and we have to really undertake that in this last third of life, that's what we're going to do. We're going to be happy. Our ages now stop being measures of how close to death we are, and they start focusing on how we feel. My mother, who had unfortunately just passed away, but she died at 96. And she was a real going concern at 96. And then one day, it was like the Queen of England. One day, she's shaking hands with Liz Truss, the Prime Minister, and the next day she's gone. But she died with her boots on. It's age affirming. Look, I'm going to be 70 years old next month. I can't be 65 anymore. That's done. But I can at least look at being 70 to say, well, this is what I've got. This is where I am, and I'm going to enjoy each and every minute of being 70, and then next year I want to be 71. It's age affirming. It's low stress, because I don't know about you, but I don't want stress in my life anymore. I don't want to have to deal with family members that stress me out, with my 30-year-old son who's moving home. I don't want to deal with financial stress, change stress. I want my life to be stress-free. You see, I know that in Australia, New Zealand, etc., the number one killer is not old age. Nobody has ever died of old age. We die of disease. Stress-related cancers, cardiovascular, strokes, and diabetes. I can take the stress out of my life and increase the possibilities that I can live longer. I'll talk more about that in just a minute. Modern elders tend to be planners because we recognize from the time that we're in our 20s that the better our plans are going forward, the more likely we are to achieve them. And the more that we plan, the better life we can actually have. I don't know if you're a planner or not. Most people really aren't. But for those of you who do plan things and understand why you're doing what you're doing, planning is magical. And then the last aspect of being a modern elder is to look at the principles of healthy aging. Now, I am not a poster child for healthy aging. But there are principles that I try and follow, and I am very short in my pursuit of the goals of healthy aging, but I still try. What gets me are those people that become couch potatoes at this point in their life, and you have pretty well just given up. I haven't given up yet, but I can see how that might happen. I think, with respect to Mary Holm, lovely lady who I am so honored to have met a few minutes ago. She's written a book, and is going to talk to us tonight about the 7 paths to wealth, right? Okay, all right. Well, I'm going to give you 7 keys to traveling a successful path to the kind of 30-year life that you can build on your own. So here's what the 7 keys are. Key number 1 is your visions and values. It's finding your purpose. Now, that sounds kind of zen in a way. Speaker up here talking about finding your purpose. Who here knows their purpose? Who really, if I sat and got you to define what is your purpose, who could answer? You don't have to. I'm not going to call you out, but anybody? This is the interactive portion of this session, by the way. All right, who has a clearly defined purpose? Well, then my question is, why not? I guess if you don't know where you're going, then any road will take you there. Or how will you know when you get there? But a purpose is what you believe you are here to be. And we won't get into religion, but we will say that because we've been given a life, I think that that life demands of us that we have purpose, that we have a reason to be. And successful retirees tend to start with, what is my purpose? And my purpose is not golf every week. My purpose is something more. In my case, as I think about what my purpose is, I'm an educator. And I really get pizzazz when I, get to speak to an audience and see if I can share some things. That drives me. But in a more general term, I'm a helper. My goal in life is to be the best person that I can be. But it's by helping other people, my family, my friends, people I don't even know. That's my purpose. When I get up in the morning and I get to do something that lets me live my purpose, that gives the day meaning. It makes it sweet. So that's why we want purpose in our life. And my challenge to you is to do as much as you can to come up with what your purpose is, no matter how old you are. You see, as we talk about the keys to success in the last 30-year life, key number 1 is having a purpose, and then because you've got that purpose, you clarify your vision of what the future will look like. I could go around the room, get your vision of the future, and it will come back like episodes. Oh, we're going to travel here. We're going to go there. I'm going to buy a boat. That's your plan, right? Well, that plan has never been effective when you were younger. Why do you think that that's going to be the plan when you get older? Push your planning a little bit further. Clarify what your vision is and clarify what your values are. As we look at your life, ask yourself, what's my purpose? What are the opportunities in life that I want to take? What is it in life that I can actually control? Because there's no sense getting upset and stressing myself out if I can't do anything anyway about it. How can I increase my resilience to roll with the punches? How can I create a balance in my life so I'm not doing the same thing over and over and over again like Groundhog Day? And what are my time priorities? What do I really need to do as soon as I possibly can? Not long ago, I spoke to an audience in Ottawa, Ontario. A woman came up to me and she said that recently her daughter, who is single and lives with her 2 granddaughters in Winnipeg, asked if the mother and father, who had just retired, would move to Winnipeg for 2 years to help her go back to university. She said, it's the only time that I could possibly do this. Mother and father talked about it. Father wasn't keen, but mother ruled the roost, and so she dictated that the 2 of them move and begin their retirement in Winnipeg, Canada. Now, I don't know if you've been to Winnipeg. 40 below sucks. So they moved to Winnipeg. They've given up their home, they've given up their friends, their family, and now they're living in Winnipeg to look after the grandkids. 18 months after they moved, he had a stroke. They had plans. They had ideas of what they're going to do. And because of the move to Winnipeg, he's okay, except that they're never going to be or do the plans that they had. So one of the things we have to decide is, as you look at the possibilities and the opportunities in your life, decide very quickly to take advantage of them. Don't be one of these people that say, yeah, well, we're going to travel, and I think maybe in 5 years we're going to go to China. Well, maybe not China, but maybe we'll come to Canada. Don't put anything off. So now, given what I've just said, and you think about your vision of retirement, have I given you a different way to look at this? Not as the permanent vacation, not as the entrance into seniorhood, but the opportunity to build a 30-year life and live the kind of life that you want. Now, what I would do if I'm starting out is I'm going to look at all of the things in my life that I value. In my case, I value my family, my faith, I value my friendships, I value using my head and continuing to educate myself. What's your value? What do you care about? Now, here's where it comes in as we look at this last third of life. The activities that you will find meaningful and fulfilling tend to come from the top 3 to 5 values that you have. If we had a longer workshop, I would have each of you write down what are the 50 values that you have. Now, there are that many. And then I'd have you shorten the list to 10, and then to 5, and finally to 3. Now, this is important in your planning because you want to spend as much time as you can doing things that speak to your values, because that makes them meaningful and makes them fulfilling. And that's what we want, meaningful, fulfilling activities. And so that's why values become important. And we want to be happy, right? We want to be happy. But let me ask you a question, true or false? The key to retirement happiness is having enough money to enjoy your life. What do you think? How many people think that's the key for you? Anybody? You do? All right. Partially. Okay, I can give you partially. I can give that. But is money really the key to happiness? Take a look at lottery winners. Are they really happy because they won $1 million? The studies out there show that there is no relationship at all between how much money you have and how happy you are. People who have lots of money can be every bit as unhappy as people who don't have any money. What generally happens is, let's say that your subsistence level financially is here, and you say, oh, I just want to get more money, so if I get it up to here, it's going to make me happier. But then what happens? You get up to here, and then you start desiring to get up to here, because this isn't good enough anymore. So if the key to happiness is something else, then why do so many people think if I just had money, oh, I could do all of these things? And then either you don't do them, or you do them and find out it was a waste of your time. People in this room can retire on considerably less than you have been told. And most of you in this room, or many of you in the room, couldn't retire on 200 or 300% of what you've been told, given the plans that you have. So we have to put money in perspective, and Mary's going to help us in a few minutes. What does science say about happiness? Well, my background is in psychology. A person that I follow is a positive psychologist. In fact, the dean of positive psychology, his name is Dr. Martin Seligman. And Seligman wrote a book called Authentic Happiness. And he looked at the science behind happiness, and he identified 5 keys to being happy at any stage of your life. I want you to listen to this and then think, all right, am I doing this? Where am I on that? He calls it his PERMA formula, P-E-R-M-A. The P in PERMA stands for positive emotion. Are you a glass half full or a glass half empty individual? You see, you're going to do a lot better in retirement if you're always looking for silver linings. Because remember I said, stress will get us. If you are always looking at the things in life that go wrong, you're going to create far more cortisol than you need. Cortisol, the stress hormone, does a lot of things to us. Undermines our immune system, puts plaque in our arteries, increases our heart size, makes it difficult for us to have normal heart rates. Cortisol. That's why we take the stress out of our life, because we're going to take the cortisol out of our life if we can. People who are positive are those people that are going to be positive no matter what happens. Look at the things as they are, not as you fear that they might be. The E in happiness, or PERMA, stands for engagement. Engagement in life. Now, when I say engagement in life, another individual that I follow who has written extensively on the activities that we undertake as we get older, his name is Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. He's a Czech. And he wrote about flow activities. And he said, you know, the best kinds of activities that you can undertake are flow activities. Flow activities are those activities where you lose all sense of time and space and you just flow. It could be woodworking in the basement. It could be running. It could be biking. It could be anything where you lose track of time and space. He said that's the most valuable. But, as he said, you can get in the trap that humans get into. The more you do it and the more you like it, the more you want to do more. And then it takes over your life. We don't want that. The R in PERMA stands for relationships. Meaningful, supportive relationships. Our relationships contribute more to our happiness in general than anything else that we do, because they cause us to produce 2 other hormones. Dopamine, the hormone that makes us feel at peace, makes us feel in love, and serotonin, the happiness drug. And we get more serotonin and dopamine from our relationships than any other activity or undertaking that we do. The M in PERMA stands for meaning. Meaningful, fulfilling activities. And I just talked about that, about doing things that you value. And then finally, the A in PERMA stands for achievement. We need, as human beings, to feel like we have done something. Maslow, in his hierarchy of needs that we all learned about in uni, he said you got the need for security, then you got our need for survival, the need for security, the need to belong. But then he said, you've got the need for ego satisfaction. You have to feel good and recognize your humanness because you've done something important in your life. And then the last one was the need for self-actualization, which is where this is all going. As I get older, one of the keys to looking at this life is I am in control. It's what I try and do. I try and be in control of it as much as I can. And being in control means I get to decide what an achievement is. That decision used to come from the workplace. But now I get to decide. I like writing lists. I get through the list, I feel good. Grandfather, grandson rake up the leaves in the fall. Grandson goes to the backyard, grandson takes the front. Grandson rakes the leaves up, goes hell-bent for leather, gets all the leaves in the backyard. Comes around to grandfather in the front yard, grandfather has only raked up half of them. Grandson says, Grandpa, why didn't you rake up all the leaves? The grandfather said, if I raked up all the leaves today, I would have nothing to do tomorrow. He raked up half the leaves because that was his goal. And he felt pretty good about himself. Your definition of what is a success is up to you. It's no longer what other people say about you. I do a lot of work with a group of attorneys in the United States, and we meet once a year. They've been meeting for 25 or 30 years because they all graduated from the same law school class, and then they went off across the U.S. At the last meeting before COVID, one of the members of our group, Marion, who was the #1 trial attorney in the city of Chicago. Marion fought the biggest cases. Marion's name was always in the newspaper. The group wanted to know, Marion, how are you handling this now? They said, everybody knew you. They don't know you anymore. Marion said, I was worried about this. But she said, you know what I do now? I volunteer 3 days a week for the Chicago Catholic School Board, and I help them build programs for kids in the inner city. I am getting more out of that than I ever got out of practicing trial law. Find what you're passionate about and then go do it. Don't just sit back and say, yeah, but it's such a small thing. I'll never have the big achievements again. I'm just going to sit here. Because you make your own sense of what is an achievement. Now, we put all of that together and we look at our opportunity as we enter our 60s and 70s. The study that came out of Harvard a couple of years ago found that when people are happiest is generally between the ages of 63 and 75. That's when people are the happiest. That's when you have the opportunity to be the happiest. And if you've been able to make it through, you can continue that happiness into your 80s and beyond. But this is a very key moment in your life. Putting together the plans to live the last third of your life. Now, a few other things. Key number 2 is practicing healthy aging. And my focus in that is not focusing so much on the physical, but focusing on the mental, because the physical can go at any time. I am more concerned about stress and stress management. My wife and I took a look at everything in our life that stresses us out. And we started to cross things off. Things, people that we are not going to allow to stress us. Now, the problem in the exercise is that many of the people we were stroking off were family. So we had to make some concessions. But as you look at your life and you think, what is it in my life that will create cortisol, will cause me with stress? Get rid of it. But yet, people as they get older tend to take on more stress. Let's say I do allow my 30-year-old to move home. Is that a particularly good idea? Or what happens if I become the bank of dad and I'm responsible for funding him? Is that going to help my own stress level? Oh, I know we do it because it's family. But I am not going to do anything anymore that stresses me out, at least if I can avoid it. And I challenge you to do the same thing. We got major stressors in our life. We've got family stress. You've got health stress, financial stress, change stress. We don't like change, and we find that stressful. relationship stress, loss of control, and boredom. You can come up with a strategy for each and every one of those and then continue to practice culling the list to make sure that you take that stress out of your life. I know you have fears around this period of your life. The greatest fears normally are things that we can control. Running out of money, skyrocketing inflation, unexpected expenses, stock market crashes, children moving back home, no one to take care of the finances, and too much debt. Each one of those could have a strategy. Now, you can't do anything about stock market crashes except protect yourself and not put all of your eggs in one basket. Warren Buffett has a great piece of advice. He said, because investing is such an inexact science, it's better to be approximately right than precisely wrong. We can handle these. And the way that you handle them is to think about them, talk about them. Here's a good chance to sit down with your Cambridge advisor and talk about these major stressors. And remember, as you get older, and we're talking about health, etc., that your fallback position is continuity theory. And the unfortunate thing is that continuity theory gets most people in retirement. The people I'm talking about, the people that really want the great retirement and to be happy, they are not in the majority. They are in the minority, and the vast minority. I'm going to say it's 25-75, with the 75 made up of people who have just given up, people are playing out the chain, people are just too unhealthy to enjoy life, and people who just think that all you got to do is keep your eyes open and you'll exist for a long time. And we know that that is not right. Key number 3 is having a positive attitude toward work. I know a lot of people that don't want to retire, but you still will because you have the societal pressure to continue on. You work because you want to work. We work because we always have worked. But I wouldn't be working at anything that was going to stress me out. Quite often I'll run into a high-performing business person and they have quit their job, but they're now going into consulting. And they work more in consulting, even though they get the big paycheck, but they work more in consulting than they ever did when they were working in the traditional workplace. So we have to be careful about that. You've got to be careful about work. Work actually has some hidden value to it. It'll give you financial stability if you need it, but it gives you time and management structure, it gives you utility and value, and it gets you into the community. It's also great for ego satisfaction and status. However you want to use work, consider it as part of your life and think of the possibilities. You can have self-employment as long as you manage your stress level, or homework. You want to build a deck in the back and get some home projects done. Personal development work. How many people here would consider in this last 30-year life going back to school? Okay, so what would you take? Take something that interests you. All right. I have a physician friend who lives in Victoria, BC, and at 65, he retired from his practice. He's always been interested in art history. And so now he found out he could take an art history course at the University of Victoria in British Columbia with a semester being taught in Tuscany. Why wouldn't you do that? You know, go to Tuscany, take your spouse or partner, get him to learn to cook Italian. But just sitting back and going, oh, I'm too old to learn, can't get anything out of it, give your head a shake. Charitable volunteer work, paymark work, paycheck work. We have Walmart in Canada. Do you have Walmart? I know you do in Australia, but you don't in New Zealand. All right. Well, at Walmart, we have these people called the Walmart greeters. Walmart decided they wanted to make it more personal when you went in to Walmart. And so you went, and the greeter always waved at you, welcomed you to Walmart, and then when you left, surreptitiously, they looked to see whether you're stealing the store and their packages. Now, those are low-end jobs. But a lot of people think that people work at Walmart because they need the money. Walmart had undertaken a study to find out that that was not the case. It wasn't that they needed the money. It was that they wanted something to do. And so that's a workplace possibility also. So we want to make work part of our retirement life. You take your strengths and your transferable skills and you say, all right, how can I use this for either my benefit or the benefit of somebody else? And thinking about what it is you like to do, because wouldn't that be nice? If you love what you do, you never have to get paid or work again. And what kinds of work might interest you? And how much time do you want to spend? The people who are successful at using work in their retirement tend to only work part-time, tend to take work as part of their leisure plan and just consider it another part of leisure. Key number 4 is nurturing and supporting relationships. We need people. Pure and simple, we need them in our lives. And this is one where I don't get into an overgeneralization on sexist issues. But in my experience, I find that men have a tougher time with relationships in retirement than women do. Who has more relationships coming out of the workplace, men or women? No, we say that. Men have more relationships, but nothing very close. Like you and I at the end of this aren't going to go have a beer and talk about feelings, all right? Well, you might, I'm not. The kinds of relationships that we're talking about are the kinds of relationships that women seem to have a better handle on than men do. Nurturing, supporting relationships. We already know how important it is that your social network be as robust as it can be. But quite often in a couple, it's the wife that looks after the relationships, not the husband. He sits on the couch, he watches the telly, looks at footy on the weekend, and his wife is out, she meets a new couple, she quickly bonds with the woman in the other relationship, and they get together. Well, the other one's husband is also on his own couch watching the footy. Science is very clear on relationships. We live longer. Studies suggest that if we have positive relationships, it adds to our longevity. We have less stress, which is what we're trying to achieve. We have healthier behaviors because we tend to model the people that we are close to. We bolster our immune systems, and we have a greater sense of purpose. So relationships are valuable. Now, if you're in a situation where you are the person that is out there pushing for relationships and your spouse or partner has to be dragged along, do what you can to drag them along. They may not enjoy it to start with, but we're hoping that they will enjoy it more and more as they do it. And some of them you're just going to have to throw up your hands because they are never going to get off the couch, ever. Your family, ever notice the older we get, and I don't think it's just a Canadian thing, the older we get, the more dysfunctional families actually are? Ever notice that? My sister and my mother had a fight for years. It comes from the fact that my mother, who was a widow, started dating again. And my sister, who was old enough to know better, took issue with my mother's new boyfriend and decided my mother was not allowed to date. My mother had other ideas. And so they had this big fight, and they fought for years. Then my mother got dementia. And whenever my sister would come to visit, my mother knew she hated my sister, but she didn't remember why. So that one was never going to get fixed. I think you want some essential conversations with your family about this period of your life. You want to certainly talk about caregiving and long-term care, involvement with grandchildren, potential moves, relocation, downsizing, health issues that they should understand, and estate planning and wills, etc., so that you make it easy on them when you do go. All of these become important in making sure that your family creates a positive contribution to this phase of your life. The last one is spouse or partner. True or false? Retirement is easier on your relationship than when you were working. Oh yeah, I jump all over that. If you don't believe me, I have two numbers I want to share with you. I married you for love, but not for lunch. What are we doing today? I'm going for lunch with the girls. Can I come? Can I come? No, you can't come. Get a hobby. Get a dog. Get a life, but leave me alone. Now, I got words for singles. Don't think you're off the hook. But for couples, it's almost like the start of a new arrangement in your marriage. Some of them must have conversations between spouses and partners. People have to agree on these things. And yet, in my experience, doing all sorts of survey work, they do not agree. How will we finance our retirement? In a lot of cases, one member of the partnership has taken control of the finances. And he is saying, or she, don't worry, dear, I'll handle it. I got it all under control. And then he drops dead and leaves her hanging. Changing roles. Schedules. I love you, but I need my space. Moving. Well, I thought we would move to be closer to the grandchildren. Honey, what are we doing today? All of these things cause conflict. And the most common kinds of conflict is the change in roles. Let's say that one member in the pair was a senior executive and now they are retired. Generally, they have to come to grips with who they now have become. If you define yourself by your work, you're going to have a harder time when you move into retirement redefining yourself. And therefore, your partner has to deal with the insecurities. There is sharing responsibilities that have to be part of the conversation, and retirement preparedness. In our experience, couples don't talk about what their goals are in retirement. Like, you have to know the goals of your spouse or partner. Do you have to know them? Do you have to share them? Well, no, you don't have to share them, but you should at least know them and respect them. My brother Gary is a golfer. Gary retired at 55, lives in Calgary, Alberta. Gary wants to play golf every summer or every winter in Palm Springs. He bought a big caravan so that he and his wife Shauna could travel to Palm Springs every year. His wife Shauna hates the motorhome, hates what it costs. He didn't even ask her. She hates to drive. She hates the desert. She hates to golf. And she hates Gary. He said, don't worry, she will learn to love it. No, she won't. So if you have one of these situations in your marriage, talk it out. Come to some conclusion on what you're both going to do. It's two people retiring. You may share a life, but you're not sharing kidneys. So talk it out. For those of you who will face this period of life on your own, I have this to say to you. I spoke to a group of Cambridge advisors yesterday And I made the point as we were talking about retirement that retirement is not a couple's issue. It's actually a single woman's issue. Now think about that. Demographics suggest that for the female in the partnership, you're going to be around longer than the male. We will check out early. Doesn't always have to happen that way, but in a lot of cases, normal things being normal, you will be at some point in your life on your own. I wish I could say it in a different way, but I'm not. And if you are sitting there ignoring that, you aren't doing yourself any favors either. Life on your own. If you are all of a sudden on your own, trust your social networks. That's why you want to build a big social network. This works for both men and women. The workplace is a good place to have surrogate family. I wouldn't be leaving work if you're all of a sudden on your own. Successful singles in retirement tend to be self-directed. Now that's, as my father would say, if it's to be, it's up to me. They are not sitting around worried about being the third wheel or the fifth wheel. They make life happen. If you are sitting here, male or female, and you may end up on your own, think about how self-directed you are. Because the more self-directed you are, the better it's going to be for you. And don't discount the possibilities for other relationships. Platonic, certainly. A lot of people go into hiding when they end up on their own, and that's not the way to do this. Okay. Key number 5 is balancing your leisure. I just have a couple of comments on this. You want to do as many things as you can in different parts of your life. There's 6 kinds of leisure. I'll go through the list. Just say to yourself, I'm doing that, not doing that. And try and balance it out. There's intellectual stimulation, the time that you spend making your mind work. Social interaction, the time you spend in your social network. Creative expression, building things, creating things. Spectator appreciation, going to plays, watching your grandkids play. Solitary contemplation, just sitting and thinking about life. And then physical activity, getting out and doing something. That's the 6 kinds of leisure. Now, I don't expect you to become overly involved in figuring out how much time you're spending in each pursuit. I just say you want to do a little bit in a lot of things. As you think of your leisure, think also in terms of what is it that you have always wanted to do. What is it you've always wanted to do? I'm a big believer in the bucket list. And the bucket list, of course, are the things that you want to do in life before you kick the bucket. What's on your bucket list? And remember how important time is to do it as quickly as you are, or as you can. Key number 6 is that your home has to work for you. I want you to think of your home in terms of whether it's working for you now or in 10 years' time, will it still work for you? Some of you have, or a lot of you have a lot of money. You have big homes. You have the big home that you've got rooms you've never visited. Is that what you want? The older you get, the more of a stress that becomes. And while continuity theory suggests that we like to remain where we are, it's the home of all of our memories, it makes us feel good. The fact is that it might not suit your purpose. You want to look at, does it meet our future needs? Is it close to medical facilities? How about proximity to friends and family? And are there safety issues that would concern us? Finally, would it simplify your life to move? Would it simplify your life? I like retirement communities. I think that if you can take advantage of one of those, it certainly helps your social network, gives you activities if you want to take them. So don't discount retirement activities or communities. And don't discount downsizing. My wife and I downsized, and we think it's the best move we ever made. Our place is only a third of what it was, and we got rid of a whole lot of stuff, but it just fits us like a glove. Key number 7 is to create a sense of financial comfort. You don't want your money to stress you out. I know we have people here who have an advisor, and I hope that you take advantage of that relationship. We have people who want an advisor, and I hope that you reach out and get to talk to somebody. And we have people who think that they can do it themselves. I take issue with that because I think you misunderstand what a good quality financial advisor does. A good quality advisor gives you 3 things. Number 1, they help you clarify the key issues that you're going to face and help you understand the plans you need to make, the things you should worry about, and the things that you shouldn't. So clarify. Number 2 is they provide you with their insight based on their training, their education, working with other clients like you, but also their insight on you personally. And then the third one is partnership. You want an advisor who's a partner with you, who you feel is a partner, not somebody who is an advisor as much as a coach, a mentor, somebody to bounce ideas off of. You've got a lot of people from Cambridge ready and willing to do that. They want to become the kind of advisor that you didn't know you were looking for. So seek them out. Okay, covered a lot of things. And I don't want to take any of Mary's thunder, so I'm going to close in this way. We talked about the role of purpose and about time. About a dozen years ago, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. Now, prostate cancer, many of the men in this room are familiar with it. I didn't get mine early. They could have taken it out, given me treatment, but I didn't get it. So 5 years ago, it metastasized. Now, you know, in case of cancer, because we've all dealt with it here, when it metastasizes, that's never good. So I went through all the treatment. More radiation than my body could take. Went through bouts of chemo. But the thing with prostate cancer is that prostate cancer is terminal. So as I'm standing up here telling you how to live your life, understand that my life is somewhat limited. Now, I'm going to tell you the good things about that. The first good thing is when I thought I was dying, when I think I'm dying, I remember how precious life really is. As I said to you earlier, the one thing about life is none of us are going to get out alive. And I've got more time than some of you might. But I bring this to your attention. My birthday comes once a week now. Over and over, the time just keeps going, and for me to an inevitable end. I'm prepared for that. But I want to slow time down. And I found a way to do it. And this is my closing message. You slow time down if you stop in your life and smell the roses. Take time to enjoy the people that you love, the things you love to do. Come up with new things you love to do. Take a look at this life that we have been given and just say, it's good today, may not be good tomorrow, but I'm going to make today last as long as I possibly can. We talked about retirement, making the last 30 of your life special. But when it comes down to it, you have control in your life to make each and every day the best it can be, and then let life take you where it takes you, and be happy even to the end. Thank you so much for coming out. I hope I gave you some things to think about. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.